In 1832, John James Audubon sailed to the Florida Keys and wrote in his journal, "With what delightful feelings did we gaze on the objects around us, the luxuriant trees, the singular and beautiful plants. The balmy air which we breathed filled us with animation. The birds which we saw were almost all new to us, their lovely forms arrayed in more brilliant apparel than I had ever before seen. And as they gamboled in happy playfulness among the bushes, we could for a while scarcely believe our eyes. All was like a fairy scene.
In the early days of the Keys, the state granted patents to wetlands and swamplands and said, come on down to the Florida Keys, populate them, build them up, make them grow. And that was the direct policy of the state of Florida.
Now, when we were here, we were lucky enough to have a small strip of land that was about 4 inches above the tide. And we camped there in canvas tents and cooked on open fires 3 times a day for the months that we spent every winter while we were dynamiting. It's quite frightening the first time you do it. But then your drag line picks it up and puts it in position. And my mother and I filled 1,700 cement bags to make the seawall that's out there. So nothing was easy in those days, and the mosquitoes were horrendous.
Ever been down here before?
No, sir. George was right. The Keys are different than anything I've ever seen, and hotter.
Don't look for it to get any cooler before November. The thermometer will go down to about 100, and the sand flies and mosquitoes will disappear, and it'll be right livable for about 3 months on the Keys, except for the tourists.
As time progressed, more and more people came down here with an attitude that they could manipulate the environment to get rid of the so-called bad things, the mosquitoes and so on, and still have the good things. They, for instance, built big bridges. They brought a big water line in. Without the support of a pipeline, the population of the Keys would be very, very small. People would have to live with cisterns the way they did many, many years ago, or with other types of water-producing systems, such as reverse osmosis or desalinization plants. But none of those systems can support the kind of growth that the current pipeline supports.
It's probably not realistic to expect no development in the Keys at any point. There will be development just because of the public investment in the infrastructure. But I think that's also a recognition of how artificial some of the living conditions are down here. Because without those types of support mechanisms, it's very unlikely that you would have the population levels here that you see now.
Come on, get on the boat. Let's go.
When we moved here 4 years ago, I guess now, the water was real clear and the bottom was just white sand and a lot of fish in it. Now, as people come, there's more fertilizer, insecticides, pesticides, everything there's more animal waste, there's more everything.
Look at that old sun's peeking up now.
I think it'll pollute our ecosystem, our whole thing out here, inshore waters as we know it. I think it's a proven fact that 80% of the fish we catch at sea start their lives in the near-shore waters. Our organization, which is non-profit, it's called the Organized Fishermen of Florida, we're concerned about it. That's a livelihood, of course.
be like a paradise here, you know. But, now there's so many people, and there was more fish inshore, you know. It's common sense to tell you that you don't have to be a biologist or an expert to see that. That's what's happening. It's just overpopulated.
Just in the past 5 years, the condominiums that's gone up and the people have increased like crazy. We're not going to have anything. It's going to be like Miami Beach.
Maybe there's no answer. Maybe there's no answer for another 20 years until we've run out and people realize we should have done something. We'll continue to live like everybody else does, and we'll have our Miami beaches, and we'll have our cities, and we'll be like everybody else in the country. We won't be unique anymore.
The clock is ticking down to February 28th, when the Monroe County Commission must adopt a land use plan, or be faced with the possibility that the state of Florida will impose a plan of its own. The proposed land use plan, the product of 2.5 years of work and more than 80 public hearings. It proposes to direct the growth of the Florida Keys for the next 20 years.
Yeah, it was a big fight. Very vocal opinions both ways. The plan was too strict. It wasn't strict enough. People's property rights were being violated. The natural resources rights were being violated.
The land use plan is attempting to preserve what the experts feel are the best and best areas of the Florida Keys, best in the environmental sense, and at the same token, the land use plan is an attempt to allow a reasonable number of people to come to the Keys, both as tourists and also a reasonable number of people to find places to live in the Florida Keys.
Land use planning is certainly one key step, but no matter how good a plan might be, the implementation of that plan has to be the ultimate test.
Thank you, gentlemen. If ever I've seen a classic example of what should be zoned suburban commercial to this piece of property, and I've made this map for you gentlemen to look at.
Everywhere you have land and potential for use of land, everyone has to have maximum potential benefit. So we have people who have mangroves who know that they can put a hotel on it. They just have to be allowed to put the hotel there, but that's why they bought the land cheap, was so they can put a hotel on it. And when you have that atmosphere and that pressure, you go ahead and let people build in mangroves because everybody's entitled to their rights, aren't they?
We don't need all the big stuff that's going in.
Most of South Florida is gone already. You can build a condo and a pool and all that stuff in a cow pasture. You don't have to come and destroy a hardwood hammock. You do put in a parking lot, and there are no more Keys. In the United States, there's no other area like this.
There's a lot of going back and forth, justices and injustices, and we got to stop fighting each other and sit down at a table, and I'm talking about federal government, state government.
All the groups are polarized at this point. I mean, there is a consensus at an extremely high level among those groups that we need to protect the Keys, but there's no consensus and very little agreement as to how you do that.
To spur conservation efforts in the Keys, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation has made grants to the Florida Keys Land Trust, the National Audubon Society, and the Nature Conservancy. With this money, the Nature Conservancy will help government agencies acquire critical natural areas.
Every day as you drive up and down the Keys, more for sale signs are out. More pieces of property have been scarified and scraped and bulldozed. The Keys literally are for sale. It is the most desirable property in a state which has experienced a boom of unprecedented proportions. And we just feel that if it doesn't get done over the next couple of years, it won't get done. So it's a pretty simple formula, really. We get some solutions in place now, or we lose it.
Working with other groups, the Nature Conservancy has identified over 24 sites of national significance. These sites are located in 3 different areas. First, North Key Largo. With 6,800 acres already protected, the remaining 2,200 acres represents the largest stand of tropical hardwood hammock in the United States.
I became involved as a landowner of one large tract in North Key Largo, next to the Ocean Reef Club and the Anglers Club, a prized strategic piece of property, highly desirable. And as we learned later from the biologists, it was also a rich habitat for endangered species, the Key Largo wood rat, cottonmouth, and the Schaus's swallowtail butterfly. Very beautiful creature indeed.
There are over 20 species of endangered or threatened plants and animals in this hammock. The whole association is a very special thing. It's different from anything else found in the continental United States.
It's a nice view on that.
And that's why the focus on this spot has become so intense.
The pendant nest with the leaves? What we would like to do in the Nature Conservancy is to try to reach an agreement with the owners, get a fair price for the property established and out of circulation. We feel that by moving ahead in that kind of a direct and quiet action, we take the glare of publicity and the spotlight off of this situation and really try to move ahead with both sides working together.
The state is trying to acquire it. It has the funds, has the will to do it. I don't think they have, unfortunately, right now, at least, the methodology.
And when it comes to acquiring land, the processes involved are very cumbersome. They're made that way over time for various good reasons, but whatever the good reasons were, they make it very difficult to acquire land. And the relationship that we enjoy right now is very valuable, especially at this crucial point in time, because the Conservancy can go in and acquire land in a very short period of time and hold it until the state process catches up.
You know, it's a great state asset, but all of a sudden now we've found out it's a world asset. It's a global asset. And as such, we who deal with it have a larger responsibility. We have to think out to further generations.
The second area is the Key Deer National Wildlife Refuge. With 7,500 acres in federal ownership, 4,000 of the most critical acres still need to be acquired.
Pinelands characteristically are the preferred habitat for white-tailed deer in the southeast. Probably the main reason for that is the pinelands are a fire-related ecosystem, and when fire burns through a pinelands, it opens it up and allows sunlight to reach to the floor, which stimulates the growth of plants, which are more nutritious for the deer. They're endangered because there's only 250 to 300 of them left, and the threat to their continued existence is the loss of habitat. Prior to 1980, we felt that they were stable at approximately 400 animals. Then with the completion of the bridges on US 1 and the completion of the new water line, it seemed like there was an explosion of development in the lower Keys. So the loss of habitat made them more vulnerable, and we've noticed a slow but steady decline. The loss of habitat doesn't kill them, but it does push them out into the roads where they can be struck by cars. And as people move into an area, a lot of times they'll bring household pets, and we have noticed an increase in the number of deaths due to dogs.
The final and largest area of concern is the coral reef system. 50 miles of reef have been designated federal and state marine sanctuaries. Still unprotected are 200 miles of the world's third largest barrier reef system.
Where else in the country do you have such a vast offshore, spectacular Grand Canyon underwater of the reef? You don't. It doesn't exist. You don't buy the water, but everything you do on the land affects the water. So we're talking of the effect of development on water by what happens on the land. Tourists come here for the water. They don't come here for the land. And if you're going to destroy the land, and this destroys the water, what are you doing to what you have?
Florida is the biggest diving state. In fact, the Keys alone is the biggest diving destination in the world. Over 1 million divers and snorkelers came to the Keys last year.
Oh, it's beautiful.
What all did you see?
Oh, it's quesadilla fish.
All right.
They're great. It's like watching a movie. It's just real peaceful. I really like you can just sit in one place and float, hover in one place, and you don't have to work at it. This is nice.
People would just stop for a minute and say, well, gee, let's make money off the environment. Let's not make money from destroying the environment. When the environment's destroyed, they'll find that the economic interest will be gone, and the people will eventually leave the state of Florida, too, as they're leaving other states in this country.
Our economic system, as we grow older and wiser, doesn't depend as much on the sunset as it does on the gin clear waters, which produces more commercial fishing than any area in Florida. Marvelous charter boat fishing, wonderful dive boat operations. Our economy is so linked to the health of our system that it is now a pleasure to be able to say we want both a good economy and as much preserved of the ecosystems, because they are the same thing on the Keys.
As we allow people to move to Florida because it becomes a land of milk and honey, that we do so in such a way that we don't lose what brought them here. They came here because of the environment that we've got. They came here because of employment opportunity. They came here because of weather or whatever reason. But whatever brought them here, we shouldn't lose it because they came here.
I don't think it's people per se, it's the behavior of people that have an impact on the system. I think there's still enough here. There's still a Florida Bay, there's still the reefs, there's still enough hammock left if we can all be rational in how we use those hammocks.
I think it's going to be a wonderful place, a wonderful treasure for the state of Florida. And preserving it won't be easy because there will be people, developers who will get real greedy, who will want the high densities and want to do a lot of exotic things. It's going to take a lot of perseverance, a lot of diligence, and a lot of watching.
The battle between the environmentalists and developers in the Keys has been going on for a decade, maybe even a decade and a half now. But I think the realization that the end of that battle is here is one that's just sort of emerging in people's minds. They're just beginning to realize that this is the final battle.